There is something we usually don't talk when we discuss poetry, and that is that poetry, like plays, is meant to be performed. So today I wanted to talk about that a little bit more in context of the children's book series Willow the Wonderer, which we are producing. I am the author and my partner Darren Price is the illustrator. So Willow the Wonderer is what you would call a narrative poem. So there are poems, there are pieces of work written in verse, and they tell a story. So hence the term narrative poems. Now, there's a lot of freedom in how you write and present your narrative poem, as there is in creative arts in general. So there is no one rule, but the common features of a narrative poem is that there's a rhythm to it, and then there's typically, especially when you're writing for children, there can be rhyme throughout it as well. So those are the two features that I actually really like about narrative poems. So when I started developing this series, I made sure it was there, and we carried it through in all the books we've written since. The thing about, and again, rhythm, it can sort of vary. With the first book, Willow the Wonderer, it was a very simple narrative. The narrative arc was fairly straightforward, and that's because we were writing for a fairly younger age group, say between 3 to 5. So, there's two parts to the narrative. There's a repeating verse, and that verse sort of dictated the rhythm or the meter that the poem was written in. And there was a second part where Willow would go to a place and find hidden creatures in the illustrations. And so that's where the meter varied, because it sort of switched into a counting mode because this book, it was also helping little ones, or is also helping little ones learn how to count. So this was probably the simplest structure, the most straightforward, the most structured, and it's really good, and it really works well for our young kids. But as we kind of progressed on the narratives, because one of the things we want to do with Willow the Wonderer books, or one of the main things we wanted to do, was to share wisdom, timeless lessons about life and living that most of us learn very late in life. So the motivation for developing these books was to create really engaging stories that also convey through the stories some timeless wisdom about life and living. And as we developed the series and went to book 2, book 3, and book 4, the narratives became more complex, because the wisdom that we started dealing with became more nuanced. And so I had to sort of change how we wrote the narrative poem. It's still written in verse, there's still rhymes, but the rhythm is something I started playing with. And instead of having one structure that I carried through the book, I found that it was more interesting when I varied the rhythm to reflect the mood of the narrative. So, in Honey Time, Willow the Wonderer, we see more of his personality, and he's this little kid, and he wakes up one morning with the zoomies. He wants to do everything and play everything and do it all at once. And so when writing that particular part of the story, it sort of made sense to go for a faster beat, so you could see the sort of mayhem that Willow was causing as he was going through the day, crashing into things, creating ruckus everywhere it went. So the stanzas are shorter and sharper, and the words are, move at a faster pace. But then there comes a point in the narrative arc where things slow down, because the queen bee decides to stage an intervention and encase Willow in a blob of honey. So he learns to slow down and see the wonders of the world. And so when that happens, it made sense to slow the rhythm of the poetry down and sort of luxuriate more in the natural environment and the descriptions to kind of reflect, again, the mood of the story. So, and it's a similar sort of pattern in the rest of the books, whether it's Space Odyssey, which sort of starts in a very sort of a bit of a downer, you know, he's feeling down, and then, you know, he goes through this entire journey, and then, you know, it reaches a climax, and as much as possible I try to get the rhythm to reflect that, you know, that mood that the character is. So it does vary in our book. It's not written to the same standard meter as the first book was. And for me personally, as the author, I think that makes things more interesting. And so my advice to the readers, because picture books are read out aloud, mostly by an adult to the little ones. We know grandparents, parents, and teachers are reading this book to their little charges. So what I would say is, you know, have the license to be a bit theatrical, you know, when you're reading these books. If anything, it'll encourage the little ones to be a bit more confident and theatrical when reading out loud, because it's not meant to be read in a same monotonic kind of thing. It's exciting, and I'm sure a lot of people are doing it already. But if you're not, or if you're wondering why it varies and how it varies and what you're supposed to do with it as a reader, I would say, you know, experiment. Pretend you're on this stage and performing, and how would you perform it? I certainly, when I'm writing it, I perform out my words. You have to read out your words to hear how they sound before you confirm, okay, this is ready for publishing. So I know I do that. I know our editors do that, who in addition to being you know, children's book editors, have a background in theatre, and children's theatre in particular. So it's really good. We sort of have that performative kind of thought and experience in our mind when we're writing this. And one of these days I'll get around to recording one of us reading it, myself and Darren, and we both do it quite differently. But that's the whole point. If the rhythm is strong enough, you know, you can play with it. So yeah, to all the readers, experiment and perform.